Why are you learning Japanese is probably one of the most common questions I've received. And like I've said, I don't have a direct satisfying answer to this. I'm sure you've heard of people talking about how they want to learn a language such as Chinese or Japanese for the sake of being able to use them for their career. But if that's the only thing that motivates you, if you do manage to become fluent in those languages to the point that you're able to use them in business, that's really impressive.
Very nice.
Because when things get difficult, the pure practical value of learning a language most of the time is not enough to keep you afloat. Learning a language is something that usually takes a very long time, so it's extremely likely that you'll have periods where you get completely disillusioned, and when that happens, it's hard to convince yourself that the effort and time spent on learning a language is worth the potential reward of your boss giving you a raise because you got Nihongo Jozu during the last deal negotiation. And I myself actually do know the feeling of disillusionment pretty well. Since I tried to use my time as effectively as possible, I was occasionally pretty conflicted during the first year of learning Japanese. But once I stopped worrying about the fact that the value of learning Japanese is vague and unquantifiable, I haven't really had any issues with motivation anymore. Learning a language is about much more than just becoming fluent in one. As cliché as it sounds, the journey is just as valuable as the destination. And if I was suddenly banned from learning Japanese, I already know that if I were to look back at my Japanese journey, I'd see it as a positive experience. That's because learning a language can be an incredibly fulfilling activity, and there are many reasons to learn one. But almost all of those reasons, as well as benefits, are subjective to you yourself. No two journeys are the same, which is why the experience I had might be completely different from yours, and that's exactly why it's so hard to explain why I'm learning Japanese without omitting a huge part of it. If you haven't started learning a language yet, and if you're wondering whether or not you should, in my opinion, that's already an indication that you have some level of interest in learning one. And in that case, I just recommend trying it out and seeing what happens. It's not like you have to sign up for a language school or anything like that either. Nowadays it's so easy to get started as there are so many books, apps, websites, and online communities which can help you get started and dip your toes in the water in only a few minutes. And I'm not even talking just about language learning, because with Skillshare you can learn just about anything. That's right, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. What is Skillshare, you may ask? Well, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. And because Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow your creativity wherever it takes you. You can get started with drawing, coding, or even with learning a language. Yeah, and personally, I just leveled up my farming by planting some tomatoes, no big deal. There are even classes made by other creators, such as the Make Animated YouTube Videos class by Ivan from Polymatter, where he not only shares how he animates his videos, but also his workflow and tips he has learned through experience. Oh, you're asking me what's my favorite part about Skillshare? Well, personally, it's gotta be the annual subscription being less than $10 a month, of course. And you know, the thing about having a subscription-based model is that you can explore as many classes as you want. And the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership for an entire month, so you too could explore your creativity. So, in general, while I think the motivation to learn a language is something that comes from within, I think a good rule of thumb is this. Are you currently consuming content in your target language? Do you intend on continuing to consume content in said language? Or do you have any interest whatsoever in a language or something associated with it? If the answer to any of those questions was yes, you might want to try out learning a language. While learning a language does take a really long time and potentially thousands of hours, the good news is that most of it can be done passively. Like I've said in my other videos, a huge chunk of my Japanese so far was learned by filling out idle times throughout the day. And once you become good enough to be able to consume content in your target language with a decent level of comprehension, it basically becomes an automatic process where you start becoming better just by consuming content, without needing direct study anymore. Let's say you already watch anime. Well, you can literally make watching anime productive if you choose to learn the language at the same time. In fact, the content that you consume doesn't even necessarily have to be originally in your target language. For example, there are a lot of superb translations of both classical and non-fictional literature that you can read, which is not only valuable in terms of learning a language, but also because you get to read, experience, and learn from that literature. And when you think about it, spending 1 to 5,000 hours on learning a language isn't really that big of a sacrifice. A lot of the people watching this video probably already have at least 10,000 hours of total playtime in video games. And of course, there are many people who have also watched thousands of hours of anime. If they had taken about 500 of those hours and dedicated them on direct study of Japanese for building a foundation, they could have already become fluent by doing something they would have been doing regardless. But of course, you don't have to learn a language. Not everyone has to do everything. But like I said before, you can just try it out because there is nothing to lose. Your goal doesn't even have to be becoming fluent, as you can have a lot of fun just by exploring a language. Although, one of the most common responses to learning a language is something like, the time you spend on learning a language could be used on learning something more practical. But most likely, you're going to waste the same 30 minutes you'd spend on doing Anki on mindlessly browsing Reddit or something like that anyway. And that's my personal answer to the question of should you learn a language. In fact, when faced with the same question about learning anything, most of the time it's really valuable just to feed your curiosity and try it out. Also, I just wanted to quickly mention again that I made a second channel and I started making update videos on it about how learning Japanese for 5 hours a day is going so far. And I have some other videos planned on there as well. So if you're interested in those, I recommend checking them out.